evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Tonight we've got a special guest with us, Drew Charles, but I would like to say thank you for joining us for the 17th annual Brimbank Writers and Readers Festival. We'd like to thank our principal sponsor, Victoria University Polytechnic, and our support sponsor, Borrowbox, for all their support in making these types of events a reality for our community. Most importantly, on behalf of Brimbank City Council, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge and recognise the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people as the custodians of the land on which the municipality sits. Council recognises the diversity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who contribute to our community, and we pay respects to their wisdom of their elders, past and present. So tonight, for many people, struggle with substance abuse in the shadows of feeling ashamed, alone and inadequate. You're not alone. Many people keep up appearances while at the same time they're kicking themselves for their alcohol use. And so many of us say, never again, only to drink again. There is a way out of this. The After Party is a story of how one person, our guest tonight, Drew Charles, dug his way out of a spiral of drug and alcohol excess. And while doing so, he discovered that sobriety was not the impossibly boring state of living that so many of us might fear, but it was filled with enjoyment and excitement in ways we can't predict when we're stuck in that loop of drinking and drug taking. Our special guest tonight, Drew Charles, is the author of The After Party, Finding a Path to Sobriety, which is a candid account of his struggle to overcome drug and alcohol addiction. He's a reformed party animal musician turned author from Melbourne. He's published a number of poems and short pieces, and he's appeared on podcasts such as 1 Year No Beer and Over the Influence, sharing his story about getting sober. He has a PhD in literature and is currently working on the follow-up to the book, The After Party. So it's my pleasure to welcome tonight's special guest, Drew Charles. Drew, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honour, so thank you.
You're welcome. So Drew, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into, writing and how this came about?
Sure thing. My name is Drew, obviously, from Melbourne, Australia, originally. Sort of an ex-musician, so I was, played music from about the time I was 18 till I was about 38. Obviously, silenced by the pandemic, as most musicians were. I've also got a PhD in English literature. I did a lot of study, worked in academia, market research, a few other things like that. The book was obviously written as a kind of way to get to reconcile myself with my drug and alcohol use, and I really used it as a kind of tool to kind of get sober. And I thought, as I was doing so, it'd just be for my own my eyes only. So I started sort of documenting day by day, the sort of experiences that I was facing as I sort of confronted what was a very problematic relationship with drugs and alcohol from a very young age. As I sort of wrote it, I started to share it on some of the sober groups that I was a part of. And I was just getting quite a lot of feedback that it was quite relatable, and that a lot of people who I really didn't expect to have those kind of experiences were identifying with it quite strongly. So I kept writing, and I kept just posting as much as I could. And as scary as it was very liberating, and it helped me a lot to kind of, I guess, just to confront my own issues at the time. That subsequently turned into the book, and I was very happy to be able to put it together into a kind of more cohesive narrative. But it very much started as a kind of daily journaling process. And then I was lucky enough to meet a publisher on one of the groups that I was on, and she suggested that I put together a proposal for her publisher, and I was lucky enough to get it signed and get it published. So that's kind of the story of the book in shorthand.
For sharing that with us, Drew. Sorry, I popped off the screen to make sure people weren't just seeing my face and they were seeing you.
That's okay.
So that's why I was being disappearing.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, so obviously you wrote the book about your own experience. In the book you talked about, having a bit of a relapse at time and things like that.
Yeah.
But what really gave you the strength to finally say, nah, not for me?
Yeah. Well, I think as I didn't realize it at the time, but as I sort of went about writing the book, I'd realized that I'd had a very problematic relationship with alcohol for a long time. It was something I did very subconsciously without too much thought. Um, and same with drug taking as well. I'd sort of, have a few beers and then, the sort of thirst for drugs would sort of kick in. But through the process, I realized I didn't have a great, I would often get to Monday and kind of go, I'm never drinking again. I hate it. I don't like it. I feel terrible. I feel like shit. I'm gonna quit right now. And then by 5 p.m. would roll around and I would actually I'd start craving beers again, and it would all go to nothing. And so that sort of cycle just went quite continuously all through my teenage years. I had spells of sobriety where I do maybe 3 weeks off the booze for like a health kick, or do a running race or something like that. But I'd always come back because I never sort of changed my idea about what alcohol was and what it meant to me. I would abstain and had this cycle of abstaining and relapsing, because I never really changed my attitude towards what alcohol was. I never sort of attempted to sort of reprogram my brain to think that it was something that I actually didn't want to do and it wasn't desirable. So the book was very integral to kind of me sort of undergoing that process. And a huge part of me writing the book was I thought, well, if it's helped me, it may help someone else. And someone might read this and just identify, they may not. It may be enough that it's just my story for myself, and it helps me. But the more I shared what I was writing, the more I saw people say, oh yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I have the exact same thing. So relapse, I think, is a part of it. But I realized through the process that I just had such a mixed relationship with alcohol, and a fairly unpleasant one, that I went back a long way. And the unpleasant experiences were sort of piling up in the corner, while the pleasant experiences were diminishing by the second.
So I think we talked a little bit about before you came on, and I think it's pretty clear in here. We talk about the drinking culture in Australia and how we celebrate, commiserate, commemorate everything, every celebration, every get together. It seems to be surrounded by alcohol.
Absolutely.
It's really quite ingrained into our psyche. Do you see that, or have you noticed, or do you feel like that's something that may change, or do you believe it's that ingrained? It's something that we can't change.
I think it's an interesting point, and it's an idea I've grappled with a lot, because I think it is so endemic in Australian culture and a lot of cultures around the world. Obviously, not all cultures, but in Australia for sure. I think that we tend to celebrate. We tend to commiserate. We celebrate the weekend. We celebrate footy matches. We celebrate births of children. All these kinds of events. But then the commiserations, funerals, these heartbreak when we break up, divorce. All these things are sort of seen to be. We even bond over alcohol. Some of my earliest friendships were formed over alcohol. Some of my deepest, connections were sort of formed in that way. And I just constantly wondered if there was another way, or if that does shift. And I think that it is slightly shifting. I think that myself, I can't speak for anyone else. I don't know how old everyone is, but I grew up in the 90s, and it was very much part of the culture. That's how you bonded. That's how you hung out. That's how you spent your free time, was sourcing alcohol, drinking the alcohol, and then dealing with the after effects of the alcohol. And nothing really changed well into my late 30s. It was the same kind of cycle. And I just thought, is there another way to be? And I tried to find the people who maybe wanted the same thing. And in Australia, that's been quite hard. And I think that, as much as I would love to say that I think it's shifting, I don't think it really has. And I think the pandemic probably threw a hand grenade in there as well. And I think that it was probably a very difficult time to be a drinker. It was certainly challenging to be a non-drinker throughout the pandemic, but I think, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's going to change, but I hope so. And I think that there are definitely some sober movements. I mean, some of the things that I've seen that I think take real encouragement from are things like Heineken's sales have gone up massively because of the sale of their zero alcohol-free beer. There's bars popping up in Melbourne, in Ireland, Dublin, New York, all over the place, London, where there's, they don't serve alcoholic beverages. It's an alcohol-free bar. And I think that tells you that there's a demand growing. So I am hoping that that with those, and I don't want to sound like a zealot, obviously I don't mind what other people do with their time, but yeah, I think it'd be nice if there was another way, give people an option. And I think at the end of the day, it's about choice and choosing the right path for you.
We were talking a little bit about how your family and friends reacted. You said your family, they read the book and then they reacted a bit differently after they knew the extent. And then you were sort of talking about your friendship groups and how some of them reacted differently to what you kind of thought they would. Can you keep going with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So so family were quite supportive, and obviously particularly like sort of my immediate family and stuff. And obviously some of my friends were really supportive as well. So that was really great and really surprising. There obviously are people that you very quickly realize were drinking buddies rather than actual friends, and that's where you probably get the most resistance. And it's I think it's nothing will sort of make you figure out who your real friends are quicker than getting sober, because I think that I certainly know that I was like that as well when I was drinking. If people were trying to get sober, I was very critical of them and very dismissive, and I obviously had that happen to me as well. So I think it's a very complicated social situation to become sober, and I think that quite a lot of people feel a bit threatened that it shines a light on their own drinking, and that's certainly how I felt when friends of mine became sober while I was still drinking. It was just straight up, I was a bit threatened, and I probably wanted what they had and didn't know how to go about it. So yeah, it was a very, very mixed experience. In the music industry, oddly, that was probably where I got a lot of support from. I think there's a really strong sense in that group that drinking that a lot of us do is unsustainable, and that at some point we're all going to have to make a decision about what we do with alcohol. So I was actually surprised with how much support I had from that, and I found it quite okay going back into the scene. But it's also very difficult because you're just surrounded by alcohol. And when I wasn't drinking, I realized how much it was just so ingrained in the culture. Like, you get paid in beer sometimes, and or it's considered to be like part of the perk of performing is that you get free drinks or whatever. So that does become, it becomes a real challenge. But at the same time, there are a lot of people there that are on the other side of that relationship. So I had some good support there as well.
Actually a good segue into our audience question. So Mel has asked, what kind of social activities do you do now with your mates now you are sober? And do your friends that still drink join you in those activities?
Yeah, so I guess it runs a bit of a, I still play music with some people. Obviously, the thing that has kind of fallen by the wayside, I like going to the footy. I like doing a lot of the things that I used to drink heavily at. The one thing that I don't really like doing anymore is going to the pub and just sitting around watching other people drink. It doesn't sort of, as much as I like hanging out with my friends, it's sort of very quickly not on the same wavelength. So although I really like going, I sort of have to tap out after about an hour or so. I'd much prefer to go have a coffee, grab lunch, go for a walk in the gardens, or do something like that. Go play golf, or just anything really, and anything that isn't revolving around drinking. And I think that was really an eye-opener for me, was seeing what was just drinking and seeing what was actually, entertainment plus some drinks, and things like, going to the footy, or even going to see gigs. Like, gigs are amazing. Like, it was so great to go to see gigs, like, and drive my car, get in, just watch the band and leave. And it was like, I don't have to actually, drink from 5 o'clock until 5 o'clock. So it's really those kinds of activities. And I guess the only thing that really got boring was just sitting around getting drunk, which is not really that fun to watch.
Yeah, fair enough. So during your time when throughout the book, you refer to joining some of the networks, being a little bit embarrassed to start with groups like 1 Year No Beer. For those in our audience, can you explain a little bit about 1 Year No Beer or whatever other networks like that you were a part of, and how they supported you and sort of what they offer?
Yeah, for sure. So I think in my experience and from the experience I've seen with you know, sort of giving some support to other people, I think you really need to find a support network. I think doing this by yourself is impossible. You need to, like, I guess like anything, you need to just try and get some wisdom from others that have sort of walked the path before you have. And that can be anything, you know, like I tried AA for a little bit, but it wasn't for me at the time. It was a very hard line, but I'm totally for AA, and, you know, they do a wonderful thing. It's just really about finding what works for you. At the time when I went to meetings, I just wasn't really prepared to kind of, you know, label myself an alcoholic forever and, you know, sort of, I guess, go down that really hard line attitude. So I sort of searched around and looked for something like that was a slightly softer approach, and I came across 1 Year No Beer, which is actually a UK-based group, and they present themselves much more as like a, you know, change your relationship with alcohol by doing an alcohol-free challenge. And at the time when I joined, that was really the kind of thing I was looking for. I was looking for that thing like, okay, this is a challenge. I can commit to, you know, 30 days. That's not going to, you know, kill me. And I just kept extending it really until I made the decision that I was like, this is probably a permanent thing. But what I got out of that group was just a lot of people, even though it was an online forum, just a lot of people that were in a very similar boat to me, similar headspace and similar dysfunction with alcohol, and we could talk and support each other. And it provided me with a group of people that I could, you know, text if I was feeling like I was about to slip up and have a beer or, you know, a line or whatever. And I found that just so useful, and I really lent on that. And it was part of the reason I started writing was because I just really wanted to, I guess, deal with some of the emotions that were coming up, and I was actually, I guess, going through with those people. So they were such a crucial part of it. And I think finding your tribe, like finding your group that is doing sobriety, or, you know, just being more mindful with alcohol, whatever you want to call it, your way, that's really important. I think it's crucial to success.
So another theme in the book, and you sort of just touched on it, it is a bit of a ride, and you do go through periods where you think maybe it's too hard or things like that. And one of the passages in your book, I think, really sums it up a little bit. And I did ask you about this before, but could you share with our audience that passage? So you were 220 days into sobriety, and you had written something down about how sort of the original gloss of being sober was kind of wearing off, and you were sort of, you know, it was with your emotions. It was getting a bit with your emotions,
Yep.
up and down. So
yep.
you wrote this piece, and if you wouldn't mind sharing with our audience now, you probably left the book in the other room, haven't you?
I did. I just had to go and grab the book. Sorry.
No worries. Once you're ready to sit down, we'd really love to hear that piece.
Okay, here it is. Okay, so I wrote this on day 220, and this is one of the poems I wrote. Black clouds circle and refuse to break. No rain, no sun, just heavy gloom in the pitiless sky. As I sit in the pinnacle of suburban drudgery that is the community pool, watching my daughter learn to swim, I can't help but feel I've achieved a new level of mediocrity. Flatness has infiltrated every aspect of me. Where once drama flowed and tension mounted, the tepid waters of detached tedium have risen and swamped me. Everything feels like it requires willpower. It's running out. What I crave is drama, to set fire to emotions and obliterate them in a tidal wave of toxicity. to fly off the edge into extremities. It's what I know. It's all I've known. The discomfort of sitting with things and having to just exist through the troughs is making my past emerge like an enticing carrot, dangling to again ensnare this donkey. It's all illusion, all trickery, but I'm weak. Everything I think warps. Is life really better now? Is it actually easier, more meaningful, more valuable? I'm not sure. But I'm unsure of everything, except one thing, my daughter. The tether from my miserable headspace to the tangible world, where I'm needed, is flailing about in the warm pools of my suburban nightmare. She is in her element, and the joy is palpable. She laughs and smiles and waves and tells everyone I'm her daddy. She says it with a pride of which I'm utterly undeserving, but I must be here no matter what I think of myself. That's all I've got today. I said to my wife this evening, I'm sorry I'm mopey McMope-faced at the moment. Her reply without a hint of hesitation was, I'll take that over Bendy McBender face any day. I don't have to worry about you anymore. Small victories turn into big victories.
Thank you for sharing that with us. So that was day 220.
Was, yeah.
Was day 220?
Yeah.
Obviously, that was quite a while ago now. Reflecting on that, do you think you've moved on a little bit, or, you know, tell us a bit about how you feel after you've read that?
Yeah. I haven't read much of the book since I wrote it, so it's quite hard to read actually. So I definitely have shifted a lot since then, and I think as you mentioned in your little intro to that piece, there's serious peaks and troughs along that first year, and I think the first year is so critical, and that's kind of why I wanted to document it. You know, you get sort of a month under your belt, you think this is wonderful, this is easy, I'm smashing this, and then, you know, the wheels really fall off at a certain point, and that can happen at several times along the way. And that was that sort of day 220, 200 to sort of 230 was a real down patch for me, where I felt like I could easily trip up and just go back to old ways. And what I kept being reminded of by the people that had been there before me was that it's natural, and also that, you know, after probably 25 years of drinking heavily and to excess, I was only 220 days sober. Barely even a year old, really, in my sober life, and so things were going to just take time, and I had to learn how to be patient. And I'm not a patient person, so I was very much like I would like, you know, instant gratification. But, you know, you come out of that those troughs, you do, and I think that maybe it was something that I would always go into, but I'd just drink it away or take drugs until it sort of went away. And learning to kind of deal with, like, I guess, the world's natural ebbs and flows was a real eye-opener for me. And it's something I'm still working at, but at nearly 3.5 years sober now, I'm feeling much more, the troughs are less troughy. Things are a bit more, I guess, just a bit more even keel, which is nice.
Right. Well, we've just had another question from Matt in our audience. He said, I'm going to read it word for word because it's quite a long one. He said, did you get through all the hard times by willpower to not drink, or to have a different way at looking at alcohol? I asked this because I did 9 months last year of no drinking through willpower and subsequently started drinking again. This time I've changed my mindset on what alcohol really is, which is a poison. And now not willpower, but simply looking at what alcohol is helped him shift.
Yeah,
so,
I think
yeah,
that's a really great point, and I think it's something that a lot of Quit Lit goes into, not just my book, but I think a lot of probably more of the scientific side of things that look into what alcohol actually does. And it's such a great point, Matt, that you've raised. And I think that you can only get by so far on willpower, and I think that if you rely on willpower, eventually you run out of it. Like, and some people might last 10 years, they might last 10 days, they might last an hour. Like, it's really hard to predict. And I think that you're right. Eventually you have to change your mindset, and you have to actually start to retrain your brain to view alcohol maybe not positively, not as this sort of thing that you're sort of desperately waiting on the sidelines to launch back into, but something that you actually don't want. And that's a very long-term process, but I think that ultimately that means that you can give up without willpower, because I think even the most strong-willed people, run out eventually. And yeah, so I think you're on the right track there.
Drew, so you just mentioned quit lit, which is this genre around quitting alcohol or substances.
Yeah, so I'm just turning the lights on. Yeah.
No worries. Quit lit, you said, it can be quite scientific, and then, you'll probably have other elements of it. I'm assuming you might have read quite a few books in this genre. Have you got any specific recommendations for people who might be interested?
Absolutely. So I think probably the first thing I did, so a little bit about my sobriety journey, sort of in a similar way to Matt's question just before. I sort of did 10 weeks of just pure willpower. And then I went to Meredith Music Festival, and I was planning on, trying to go sober and, whatever. And I really didn't. I had one beer and I flew off the rails and had a massive, massive bender. And that was the kind of moment at which I thought this has to change. And so the first thing I did was sort of put the feelers out to anyone in the group and sort of say, what's the best quit lit? So the ones that resonated for me personally were Catherine Gray's novel, The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. That was huge for me. I really resonated with her story. It was quite similar in her approach to mine. It was very much a personal story of alcohol. It wasn't too sort of preachy. It was very much of sort of her experience with it. I also read Alan Carr's Quit Alcohol the Easy Way, which he adapted from his book about quitting smoking. It was very old school and sort of gave you a lot of tips, but it was really, I really enjoyed that as well. And the other one that I found really useful was This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. They were probably the top three, I think, that I really, really resonated with me. Particularly at the time, they weren't too, I guess I was struggling with some of the other books that were a bit more, I guess, like mine, in that they recanted, all the benders and all the misdeeds and everything. And I actually found that to be quite triggering. So I sort of steered clear from some of that. And I can understand if people, find my book a bit triggering as well. So I think you just have to tread carefully with those kinds of things and recognize what you're trying to get out of the quit lit. And whether you're sort of in for it for entertainment or whether you, feel like you have a problem and you need some help. Yeah.
Quit lit, there is quite a lot out there, and not just our libraries, but all libraries, audiobooks. Check out BWRF. There's a heap of selection on there that you can find something, and hopefully it'll be something that might help you on your journey.
Sure.
I've got a question. I hope it's not too personal, but in the book early on, you talk about how you'd come home, so you'd had a big one, and your daughter came in the next morning and said something along the lines, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, that daddy stinks, because he smelled like alcohol.
Yep.
And then later in the book, you're sort of talking about your daughter, and in your passage you just read about how much she was loving getting to spend all this quality time with you. So is that something, I know it was a driving force for you, your family, but, you talk about great experiences and enjoying sober life. Can you tell us a little bit about how, it might have strengthened your relationship with your daughter and your family?
Yeah, definitely. So I think looking back, a lot of my partying around when she was born was probably a little bit to do with the fact that I was probably struggling to cope with the idea of, being a parent, full stop. And it's a huge transition, I think, for anyone. And, sort of living this double life of, working full time and, trying to be a rock star or whatever, or trying to be a successful musician, and also being a parent of a fairly newly born daughter. And I just wasn't really, I don't think it had really connected yet that what I was doing would eventually model behavior for her. And I think that it was that moment when she sort of said, when she could talk and when she could sort of analyze me and look at me and sort of comment on me, that really sunk in, that like I'm actually modeling behavior to this person. And at what point do I fall into that trap of like, tell her what to do while I'm actually modeling the exact behavior I'm telling her not to do. And so that wore really quite heavily on me. I was like, well, at some point I'm going to have to actually model some good behavior if I want her to kind of have a decent relationship with alcohol. So I just thought, what if I gave her an Australian dad that didn't drink? What would that look like for her? And I'm not in any way suggesting that everyone needs to quit alcohol right now, to be a good parent. I would never suggest anything like that. But just for me personally, knowing that alcohol led so quickly and easily for me to do things like stay out all night, get on whatever drug I could find, forget all my responsibilities, forget her, forget my wife. It was just, it just needed to shift. And it was that kind of resonance of her speaking like she did that sort of made me finally pull the trigger and say, let's at least give this a go. And then as I got into it, I started to unravel a lot of the issues I had with booze and drugs.
Right. So we'll probably wrap up soon, but I've got one question. You are working on the follow-up to this. Any hints on any of it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually writing a novel this time. So it's I've said all I needed to say about me and addiction, I think, in my book. So I feel like I needed to kind of explore the themes and the issues in a more kind of, in a freer kind of context that wasn't so, centered, egotistical, I guess, in a way, although all writing is inherently egotistical, I guess. But so yeah, I'm working on a novel. It's sort of like a dystopian kind of new adult, so slightly older than young adult, set in a fictional world that sort of solved all of our major crises at the time. It was deep pandemic when I wrote most of it, so it was very, very much around disease control and public health and stuff. So, but yeah, the lead character has really bad alcohol and drug addiction issues. So I've tried to address it in a more kind of I guess a fictional way, but explore some of the things that maybe were in this current book, but I either didn't feel comfortable talking about, or that just weren't, some kind of extrapolation of my experience. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I've got the first draft done, but whether it, you know what writing's like. It's first draft doesn't mean much.
Yeah. So we'll just have to keep our eye out and wait. Follow you on socials and see how it all comes along, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing is, if anyone wants to talk about any of these issues, I'm always happy to take messages or whatever on social media. So particularly on Instagram. So if you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, I'm always open for that. And I'm a big believer in supporting people in their efforts to get sober. So I'm always happy to chat about it.
Thanks for that. And we're actually going to put in I've just done it. We're actually going to put in some services that are in the local community to Brimbank. So if you are struggling with this or this was triggering, there's some places that you can go for some support. So please take down those numbers there. So we've sort of talked about all of these things. If somebody in this audience said, all right, that's it, it's my time, what would be your key pieces of advice to those people?
I think number one is you have to get super honest with yourself, really, like no sugarcoating, without like beating yourself up and flagellating and falling into that spiral of like a terrible person, all that kind of stuff. Just be honest with how much you're drinking, with how much it's affecting your life. That's the first step, I think. And then I think it's really a case of finding a way that approaches sobriety or mindful drinking or whatever you're after in a way that works for you. So I would go on a seek out groups. whether it's AA or 1 Year No Beer or Hello Sunday Morning, just jump online and have a look. Talk to anyone that you know that might be sober or not drinking as much anymore. Just pick their brains and just be an open book and try and learn from what's out there. There's a lot out there, and I think Quit Lit's a really good first stop as well, because you can sort of start to see how others have done it, and you will find a way that works for you, and that's really the key, I think.
So I guess I've probably got about one final question. I don't want to say the pandemic's over, but we're certainly on the other side of our massive lockdowns and things like that. What are going to be some of your key steps into reintegrating or perhaps playing music again? With your now 3.5 year sober self. So what are some of the steps you're going to take?
So I approach anything that I feel like I might get triggered. I prepare, and I think that's one of the key things that I've learned. If I'm going into a situation where I know there's going to be heaps of alcohol or heaps of people that I may have partied with in the past or whatever, and I feel like my resolve's weakening, I go in with a plan. And I have a list of people who I know I can message. I have some strategies in place. Leave at 11, all these kinds of things. Drive the car. So I think that those kinds of things are always going to be important for me to reintegrating back into the world of music, or going back into the world where there's lots of temptation, I guess. In terms of, I guess, the pandemic, it's interesting, isn't it? Sort of, I think that it would have legitimized a lot of people drinking more than they usually did, because I certainly, for me, I found that I would drink the most on my own, because it was where I could get away with it without people looking at me and judging me and saying, oh, look how much he's drunk or whatever. So I think it's going to be an interesting time over the next year or two to see what the sort of fallout is with people's substance use, and what that's looked like over the past couple of years. But I think that human connection is really key in sobriety, as it is in I guess making us feel like we need to drink as well. So often the answer is there, I guess, wrapped up in the problem. So I think that connecting with people face to face again is going to be hugely important for people to stop drinking as well. So
I think our audience member has just asked the question I was going to follow with. Any advice on how to approach or support someone else to consider drinking less? And I was also going to throw in there, how can you be a good ally to someone who's chosen not to drink anymore?
I'm going to answer the second part of that question first, because I think it's a much easier one. So I think the best thing you can do to be an ally or to support people that are sober is don't offer them alcohol. Just don't. Doesn't matter if you feel like you're not going to have as good a time or whatever, just don't pressure them to drink. They're probably trying way harder than it looks on the surface, and you don't really know what kind of battles people might be having. So I think the best thing you can do is that if someone has said to you they're not drinking, or you get the impression that they're not, just buy them a soft drink or buy them a mineral water or a coffee or something. It really does make such a big difference when you're trying to give up and people don't offer you alcohol. It's huge. It makes you feel really like, you're being seen and you're being supported. In terms of suggesting to other people that they're drinking too much, it's really tricky. And I think that this is a very problematic area, and one that I see a lot. And I think that the problem with sobriety is that it really has to come from the individual. It doesn't seem to work even if it's for children, for doctors, for spouses. It just doesn't quite stick unless the person themselves really wants it for themselves. Having said that, I think steering people in the direction of Quit Lit and any kind of groups, or even just mental health stuff as well, because quite often people are drinking in excess as a response to an issue. So I think just being a supportive and as good a friend or partner as you can be is all you can do sometimes, and just, I guess, help people steer them towards the right resources. But yeah, it's a very fraught one. I wish I had better news on that front. It can be really tricky.
think if there's no last minute questions from our audience, I think we might be ready to wrap up tonight. I just want to say on behalf of Brimbank City Council and Libraries and the Writers Festival, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here. And we also really appreciate the fact that you were so honest in not just this conversation tonight, but in your book that you've, allowed our community to be part of and to read. So thank you for that, Drew.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real honor. It's been great to talk to you. So yeah, thanks so much.
No worries. And I do, just in case they're dipping out and they haven't seen, congratulations to Mel from Footscray and Matt from Longwarry. You are the winners of Drew's book. So there's some details about how you can claim your prize. So congratulations to you guys there. You're getting a lot of thank you messages in the chat box, Drew, but once again, thank you. And thank you for everyone for attending. If you are keen to attend some more events, we've got the festival goes through till Saturday, losing track of days, till Saturday. You can check out the program. All the events are no charge to attend. So please feel free to join us either in person or online for further events this week. Thanks everyone and have a wonderful night. We really appreciate it. See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.